I put all my meeting clothes, all my modest clothes, my high-necked blouses, my long skirts, all my magazines, everything apart from the Bible because nobody throws Bibles away. I put everything into a black bin liner and took it out onto the street and put it in the bin. Hi, my name's Ali Millar, and this is the moment I decided to leave the Jehovah's Witnesses. This picture on the top of me, I think we'd been on the ministry. We used to do what was called rural witnessing. You used to basically drive around going to farms. It would take a long time. You'd get to count all your hours, so you looked really holy on paper. But we found a donkey. I think I'm about 3 in this picture. I climbed up the fence and jumped on the donkey. The donkey came to talk to us and I jumped on the donkey, and I'm pulling my arm away from my mum, who is valiantly trying to remove me from the donkey before he runs off or does something. So that's what I'm doing in that photo there. I grew up in the Scottish borders in Scotland in the 1980s. It was a very rural upbringing, very pretty, but also very isolated. In the house, it was just me and my mum and my half-sister. My mum was from quite a middle-class family. She was a single mum with my sister, and then my dad came along. He was a South African doctor. He was very charming, and she thought that she was going to get married to him. They were engaged. She was pregnant. And then he left. And so that sort of threw her into this big disarray, this almost like crisis of identity, I think. And the witnesses called very shortly after he left. Slowly over time, she converted. And when I was 2, she became a Jehovah's Witness. Jehovah's Witnesses ostensibly are a religion. They started in America in the late 1800s and then spread around the world. There's a number of beliefs, a number of core beliefs. One of those is that the end is coming and that it's coming very, very shortly. I remember, just from as early as I can remember, being really scared of the end coming and then thinking that that made me bad, and so that then I would definitely be deserving of destruction because I was supposed to be happy. It was supposed to be a happy event because then it meant that we would live in paradise. I was also scared because my grandparents weren't baptised and were very against the witnesses. I was really, really scared of them dying. One of the witnesses' beliefs is that the dead will be resurrected after Armageddon, even non-believers. And I used to secretly hope that my grandparents would die before the end came so that I would be able to see them in the new system. Otherwise, I wouldn't see them again. So yeah, there was a lot I was very scared of. I became quite an anxious child, but I think that was the overriding fear of the end coming. And I was also really scared that I would die at the end. I wasn't totally scared of dying, but I was really scared that my mum would find out what I was like inside because God would judge me and then I would be dead and she'd know that I had been naughty as well. I think when you're told that something is the one true religion and is right for long enough, you believe it. And I was told it constantly. I was told it all the time. The witnesses refer to their religion as the truth. And so there were no doubts when I was growing up. I really just doubted myself. I was terrified. I was terrified of losing everybody. Particularly, I was absolutely terrified of losing my mum because I knew that that would happen. She's very devout. But I was also scared because it was my whole world. It was absolutely everything was contained within this organisation. And I'd done everything I was supposed to do, so I didn't have friends at work. I didn't have anyone really on the outside who could support me through. So I was really scared of that. And also because their beliefs work their way so deeply into you. It was still the fear that if I left, I would die and be destroyed. And so I was absolutely totally terrified of the world outside. Very, very scared. And the thought of having to be part of that and one of these people that I'd been told was terrible was a really difficult thought to get my head around as well. I think because I'd always thought that I was in some way special. I'd been told from being so young that I was special, that to kind of counter that and think I'm going to have to join these people who are not special and who are sinful and bad. That took quite a while to get my head around that too. So there'd been a couple of years of this slow realization and trying to run away from my doubts, basically. I tried all sorts just to squash them and get rid of them. And then I was at the Kingdom Hall one day, and I was recently divorced, and it had been quite a difficult time. And the circuit overseer got up on the platform, and he looked directly at me in front of a collected audience of maybe, I don't know, over 100 people. And he said that anyone who was divorced would never have Jehovah's pleasure. And I tried for over a year to be really good and do everything that I was supposed to do. And yet here was this man who was very well respected in the community saying that I would never get God's pleasure again. And I thought, well, what am I doing here then? And so I packed my books up. I walked down these stone stairs and past people queuing outside the butcher's shop for their Sunday roast. And it was drizzling outside. I walked up the hill and right over to the other side of the city. It was about a 2-mile walk. I was quite wet from drizzle by the time I got home. I put all my meeting clothes, all my modest clothes, my high-necked blouses, my long skirts, all my magazines, everything apart from the Bible, because nobody throws Bibles away. I put everything into a black bin liner and took it out onto the street and put it in the bin. And I remember just after I'd done that, going straight to bed, just curling up and going to sleep. And I knew I'd never go back. I'd lost formative years. So when you're a teenager, it's about experimenting, it's about discovering who you are. But I'd been told who I was from the age of 2. So I didn't need to experiment. I wasn't allowed to experiment. Any experimentation was seen as sin. So when I left, I needed to discover what I liked. I needed to learn cultural references. I grew up without a television. There was so much that I didn't know that I had to kind of fill in, because culture is so important. It's like this touchstone of all our interactions. And I couldn't interact with people without that. So for quite a while after leaving, it did feel like, almost like undergoing your own death and watching it at a distance and then needing to remake a person after that too. It's been a difficult life to build. I feel like it has actually been something that I've built. It's not something that I just have. It can at times feel very dislocating. It can feel very fragmented when you've had a loss like that, because it means that the life that you used to have takes on this sort of air of unreality. But the life that you're trying to work towards isn't real at that point either. So there's this period of extended limbo. And for some people, it can be a really dangerous period. A lot of people who leave die by suicide quite shortly after. It's a big problem for people who are trying to exit high control groups. I never wanted to write the book. I didn't want to be somebody who spoke out against the organisation. I tried to write fiction, and I realised that I was constantly writing around this huge big elephant on the page. So I thought, right, I'm going to have to do it. I sat down and I wrote a first draft very quickly with the idea that it would get it out my head and then I could go back to trying to write a novel. And it did get it out my head, but I still realised that I needed to share the truth. I had a friend who had left and he died by suicide. After he died, I thought, you know what, I've got to say this. I can't not say it. So there was a few things that kind of all converged that resulted in me taking writing the book seriously.